All right, I need y'all to be real with me for a second. When you first saw Turbo Granny and Dandadan, and I mean the very first time, what did you think? Be honest, you thought she was just some creepy old hag running at 100 kilometers an hour trying to steal a teenage boy's family jewels. You thought she was just another wacky monster of the week that this show threw at us because Dandadan is just built different like that. And look, I don't blame you on the surface. Yeah, that's exactly what she looks like. But see, that's the whole problem because y'all keep looking at the surface and we are not a surface level channel. Because here's what nobody is talking about. Here's the thing that everybody slept on while they were too busy screaming at the screen. Turbo Granny is not a villain. She never was a villain. She was the only person in that entire tunnel who was actually doing the right thing. And the universe rewarded her by turning her into a monster for it. Let that sit with you for a second. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we are not just watching the story, we are dissecting the mind behind it. And the mind behind Turbo Granny is one of the most tragic, most misunderstood, most layered pieces of character writing I have seen in anime in a long, long time. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, let's set the stage real quick for anybody who's new here, because I need everyone on the same page before we go deep. So Dandadan, the show opens up with two main characters, Momo, a girl who believes in the supernatural, and Okarun, a guy who's obsessed with aliens. They make a bet. Momo goes to a haunted location to prove ghosts are real. Okarun goes to prove aliens exist. Classic, we hate each other, but are clearly going to fall in love energy. Now, Okarun ends up in this haunted tunnel, and that is where he meets her. Turbo Granny, Turbo Batchan, old woman, moving at 100 kilometers per hour with her spine bent at an angle that should have her in a nursing home, not a foot race. This woman looks like if your grandma got a turbo engine installed and lost her whole mind in the process. In the moment she locks eyes on Okarun, this man's life is over. She possesses him. What? She steals his Kaden and I'm gonna say this, respectfully, his Kintama, his family jewels as payment for his life. She basically hit him with the most cursed trade offer in anime history. Like, you're a background character. You walked into the wrong tunnel. Pal, you're not that guy. And Turbo Granny made sure he knew that. So naturally, we all watch this and go, okay, she's unhinged, she's terrifying, she's the villain, got it. But that's where y'all made the mistake, because the moment you ask why, the whole story flips upside down, okay? This is where we put on our thinking caps, because Turbo Granny is not just a random supernatural entity. She is an amalgam. She is built from layers of Japanese history, urban legend, and real human grief. And once you understand what she's made of, you will never look at her the same way again. Layer 1, the urban legend Turbo Granny draws directly from a 1990s Japanese myth called the Jet Baba, the 100 kilometer per hour hag. The legend is simple. You're driving on a highway at night, going fast, and this old woman just appears beside your car, running, keeping pace, staring at you. And the terror alone causes accidents. Now, why does that legend exist? Think about it. What does a speeding, unstoppable old woman on a highway represent? It's the fear of something you can't outrun, something from the past, from history, from your ancestors that refuses to be left behind no matter how fast modern life moves. That's what she is. She is the thing society tried to leave behind, the forgotten, the discarded layer 2. And this one hits different. There is a historical Japanese concept called ubasuit. And I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Ubasuit was the practice of abandoning elderly women in remote mountains during times of famine, just leaving them there to die alone because they were seen as a burden. Now, whether this actually happened widely in history is debated, but the myth of it exists. And that myth carries a specific psychological weight. The idea that society, when things get hard, will just abandon the women who can no longer produce for it. The women who are old, who are past their usefulness, Turbo Granny embodies that resentment. Deep down, underneath all the speed and the screaming and the horrifying spine curvature, she is a woman who was discarded, who was left in a liminal space, a tunnel, literally a between place, and told she didn't matter anymore. And here's where it gets layered, y'all, because here's the part that actually made me pause. When I first put this together, she didn't stay in that tunnel because she was evil. She stayed there because the girls needed her. Okay, I need everyone to slow down with me here, because this is the part where I need y'all to actually feel this. That tunnel, Turbo Granny haunts. It was not just some random creepy location. That tunnel was where a serial killer had been disposing of the bodies of young women. Girls who were victims of assault, girls whose deaths were violent and sudden and unjust, and their spirits, they were still there. Trapped, confused, overrowing with rage and grief so heavy, it was on the verge of transforming them into something purely evil. into hateful entities that would hurt anyone they came across. Turbo Granny stayed in that tunnel specifically to console them, to sit with those souls, to keep them from crossing over into pure malice. She was holding them together. She was the only one who even showed up for these girls when the rest of the world had already moved on. Now, here's the psychology of that. And I'm going to say it plain so everyone gets it. Turbo Granny developed what you'd call a hyper-defensive protection instinct. When you spend long enough absorbing the grief of people who were violated, when you're surrounded by the pain of girls who were hurt by men, your brain, your spirit, your whole being starts to see the threat everywhere. It stops being able to separate the guilty from the innocent. It just sees the pattern. Man enters tunnel. Man is a predator. Eliminate the threat. That is why she attacked Okarun, not because she is evil, but because she has been living inside a wound for so long that she forgot what the world looked like before the wound existed. And that is one of the most heartbreaking things about her character. She had genuinely good intentions. She was protecting people. But the trauma of being the sole guardian of all that grief for all that time, with no one to help her, with no one to even acknowledge what she was doing, it warped her. It turned her protection into something indiscriminate, something that hurt the innocent alongside the guilty. She became what she hated, not because she wanted to, but because nobody ever gave her a way out. Think about that. This woman, this spirit, gave up whatever peace she might have found in death to stay behind and look after a group of girls the world had already forgotten. And her reward was becoming a monster, becoming something that people run from, something that history never bothers to explain. And the only reason WE know her real story is because Dandadan decided to actually ask the question, why? See, this is what I mean when I say y'all were sleeping on this woman. You really looked at the 100-km/h spine-broken grandmother stealing a teenage boy's kentama and said, yeah, that's just a villain, bro. She was the guardian. She was the protector. She was the only one in that tunnel doing anything for those girls, and y'all had her filed under random antagonists. Tragic, honestly.
Okay, real quick, because we need to talk about this because it is genuinely one of the most quietly brilliant details in the whole show when Okarun taps into Turbo Granny's power. When he borrows her strength, he doesn't go Super Saiyan. He doesn't power up with some screaming, hair going golden, music swelling moment. He gets sad, apathetic, flat, like the weight of everything just landed on him at once, and suddenly none of it feels worth the effort. And that is not an accident. In basically every shonen ever, power-ups come from fighting spirit, from the will to protect, from passion. But Turbo Granny's power doesn't come from passion. But Turbo Granny's power doesn't come from passion. It comes from grief. It comes from centuries of sitting with loss, of absorbing sorrow, of holding together the broken pieces of other people's pain with no relief and no rest. When Okarun uses that power, he is carrying all of that. He is feeling what she felt. That what's the point feeling. Not nihilism in a cool anime villain way, but just exhaustion. The real kind, the kind that comes from caring too much for too long with no one caring back. And here's the other thing. In this state, Okarun drops his social mask completely. He stops being the careful, polite, slightly awkward nerd he performs for everyone at school. He addresses people by their first names without thinking. He is blunt. He is raw. He is sincere in a way that his normal self never lets through, because that is what Turbo Granny's energy actually is underneath all the chaos. Radical sincerity, a refusal to pretend she is a spirit who has seen too much to bother with performance. And when her power runs through Okarun, it strips all the performance away. Her greatest weakness, her grief, her exhaustion, her heaviness becomes his greatest strength. Because the moment you stop pretending, you stop fearing. And the moment you stop fearing, nothing can move you. That is Turbo Granny's real power. Not the speed, not the strength, the weight, the unbreakable weight of someone who has already lost everything and is still standing.
All right, now let's get to the part that genuinely surprised me, and I think surprised a lot of people who actually paid attention. After Momo and Okarun defeat Turbo Granny, and shout out to that fight, by the way, that was nasty work. Her power gets mostly sealed. What's left of her consciousness gets trapped inside a Maneki Nico, a lucky cat doll, and here's what's funny. What's genuinely, beautifully funny about this? She doesn't change. Not really. She is still arrogant. She still has her whole ego fully intact. She is still talking crazy inside this little ceramic cat, like she didn't just get cooked by a high school girl. And a boy who borrowed her own power to beat her. But and this is the part that matters, she stays in the Ayase household. She watches over Momo. She warns the group when danger is coming, while absolutely pretending she doesn't care. She keeps acting like she's doing everyone a favor by even existing in the same space as them. She is being maternal,
in the most passive-aggressive, arrogant tsundere way imaginable. But maternal protective present because at the end of the day, that is who she has always been, a protector, a guardian, a woman who, once she determines that someone is worth caring about, will never fully walk away from them. And Okarun specifically, Okarun cracked something open in her because Okarun is a boy who goes to haunted locations not to hurt or prey upon anyone, but because he genuinely believes with his whole weird heart in a world beyond this one, he entered her tunnel with zero ill intent. He was just a kid being a kid, and I think on some level that is what gave her the first moment of real peace she had felt in a very long time. The proof that not everything that enters the darkness comes in to take something. Sometimes things enter the darkness just because they believe there's something worth finding there. She found a family not because she went looking for one, but because a family walked into her tunnel and refused to write her off.
So what do we actually take away from all of this? Because here's the real thing Turbo Granny is teaching us. And I want you to hear this clearly. Turbo Granny is what happens when a protector gets no protection, when a caregiver gets no care, when someone spends so long holding everyone else together that they stop being able to hold themselves together, when the grief you carry for other people has nowhere to go and no one to share it with. It doesn't disappear, it just transforms into something unrecognizable, into something that looks from the outside like a monster. And the tragedy is that society tends to stop asking questions at that point. It sees the monster, it does not ask what the monster was protecting. It does not ask how long the monster stood watch. It does not ask what the monster lost or who left them behind or what they looked like before the grief got so heavy it bent their spine at 90 degrees and made them run at 100 kilometers per hour down a dark tunnel just to feel like they were still moving. We all know someone who got pushed too far, who cared too much for too long without anyone caring back, who started out trying to protect something and ended up becoming unrecognizable in the process, who would have been fine, who would have been more than fine if someone had just shown up and said, I see what you've been doing here. I see who you're protecting. You don't have to do this alone anymore. That is all Turbo Granny ever needed. And a weird kid in a haunted tunnel accidentally gave it to her, and now she lives in a lucky cat on someone's shelf, still running her mouth, still pretending she doesn't care, still warning people about danger because old habits of protection die hard. Honestly, good for her. She earned that shelf. So yeah, next time you watch Dandadan and you see Turbo Granny pulling up in that lucky cat form, acting brand new like she wasn't just 100-kilometer-an-hour supernatural menace 2 arcs ago, I want you to remember what she actually is. She is not a comedy mascot. She is not a random villain turned pet. She is a centuries-old guardian spirit who absorbed so much grief that it broke her, found a found family by accident, and is now healing in her own arrogant, chaotic, completely unhinged way by being present for people she actually believes in. And that is a character arc. That is what fiction is for. That is why we are here. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and catch you in the next one.